Um, the next up, I want to introduce you to Keeley Creedy, who's a head of community care law at Coram Jones Legal Centre. As I mentioned earlier, there is a problem of refugee children being wrongly assessed to be adults and experiencing what is really a major assault on their rights by missing out on social care support that they need. And they're also locked out of advocacy as well. So Keely's going to share some legal perspectives on this issue and describe what young people, advocates and others can do to address that. So over to you, Keely, if I can.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Yeah. I'm Keely. I'm head of the community care team at Coram CLC. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and contribute today. I think I probably have spoken with or recognised quite a few names of those that are here, but there's probably quite a few new faces as well. And just to say, I actually have COVID at the moment, so I will also need to apologise if I start having a coughing fit or need to take water. Hopefully I won't be too bad today. So yeah, age assessments is quite a wide topic and quite a meaty one. So I'm going to try and keep it sort of as relevant as I hope for you guys, and keep it to the type of things that you're likely to come across and the sort of things that may be helpful. I think for a fair few of you, particularly those linked with Always Heard, Andrew's obviously said about the number of young people you've already helped in this sort of scenario. And the 80% success rate is quite astonishing, and I think quite reflective of how the process on age is very much broken one. But I will start with a bit of context and sort of how the sort of age issue arises. So mostly it's in relation to unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, so children who arrive in the UK on their own without family, and often without ID or proof of age, or ID and a proof of age that's viewed to be reliable by the Home Office. And age is a decision that's made at the point they come to the attention of one of the UK authorities, which quite often is the Home Office at the point they claim asylum. They are usually arriving by boat, by plane, back of lorries. So that usually determines at what point they come to the attention of the authorities and when the age assessment happens. But also age can arise with young people who have been in care for quite a while, and suddenly a concern about age comes up, and it's a decision that's then made to do an age assessment. The majority of cases, I think, Always Heard particularly have been dealing with are about young people who have been assessed to be adults rather than children. But just to say, there's quite a number of cases where a young person is accepted they're a child, but just not as young as they claim to be. So we often see, a young person who claims to be 14 but are determined to be 16. So yes, they get into social services, care and support, but obviously that support is not in line with what their claimed age is. So again, another important factor and reason to look to see if it can be challenged. There's also situations where young people just don't know their age, don't know their date of birth, and or it's quite clearly established that what they might think is their age possibly isn't. So they could kind of arise, and they're very case specific in terms of how they then play out in terms of a challenge. But I think understanding why it's an important factor, and I know you've touched on this already, Andrew, in terms of services and support from social services, but also sort of for children, it goes to their very identity. And I think when they're in a situation away from family, away from anything that they know, things like their name and age is sort of all they've got, and when they believe that they know their date of birth or they know their age and it's not believed, it can cause them a huge amount of stress, it can cause them a huge amount of upset, and linked to that is usually, as a child, that information's been passed to them by somebody they trust, usually a family member or a parent. So again, when someone's questioning that, for them it can be extremely distressful because it feels like an accusation against their family member about them being dishonest. So there's quite a lot of emotional issues that sort of linked to age disputes that can really impact on a young person's mental health, which is quite often overlooked within the process by the authorities currently. And then the sort of big reason why I guess age has become such an issue is that the Home Office are of the view that because there are benefits to children claiming asylum over adults claiming asylum, and how the asylum process plays out and the opportunities to maybe get granted leave or to get a positive outcome on their asylum, they are of the view that there is good reasons for people to lie and claim to be children when they're in fact adults. So that's the sort of approach, I guess, where they're coming from, in that they do feel that there are a high number of people who are giving false information. So when and how is age assessed? There's no test for it. It's all about judgment and opinion, very often about credibility. And the assessment process has been developed through a number of cases, a number of guidance that have been issued. And it's both Home Office and social services who are able to make decisions on age, which is quite an odd situation as well. And I thought that I'd sort of focus on children in hotels initially, because I'm aware this is a common issue that's being dealt with. And that's come about because there's been an increased use by the Home Office of accommodating adults in hotel type accommodation. That's being stretched. It sort of was slightly more isolated to London, and it sort of seemed to become more common during lockdown, but is now kind of seems to be branching further afield throughout the UK, particularly to areas where there potentially isn't the structures in place for support for refugees, for migrant children, and for organisations and charities and advocates who are live to the issue of age, know how to deal with it, and understand the process. So we are certainly seeing a huge increase in referrals that are coming through to us with that situation. But I think the fear is that that's just the tip of the iceberg. And in fact, there are probably a number of hotels where there are age disputed children, and they currently haven't maybe got a path through to Always Heard or to other amazing sort of advocacy service or refugee charities that can help signpost them and help them deal with the age issue. So it's a sort of quite a hot topic at the moment. I think there is quite a lot of concern around sort of what might be happening and that people don't know about. But what is amazing is that Always Heard exists, and that you've already helped so many people, and that you've had such a great success rate as well. But I suspect that you may also continue to see an increase in the numbers. So kind of how do we end up in a hotel? So there's possibly like a couple of scenarios. So it can be that the Home Office, where they will have been placed in the hotel, right, and they're treating them as an adult, just simply aren't aware that they're a child. And that can occur for many reasons, potentially issues with interpreters, wrong questions being asked, the young person not being in a fit state to sort of fully understand what's happening, to give the right information. Or more commonly, their age is not believed by the Home Office, and a decision has been taken that their physical appearance and demeanour very strongly suggests that they're significantly over the age of 18. So in that scenario, no age assessment is completed. It's simply the views of an immigration officer, and that just needs to be a sort of a second pair of eyes, as they call it, needs to just confirm that they agree with that view, and then that's the decision taken, and that person will be treated as an adult. And usually then they will either remain in a hotel or be placed in a hotel and continue to be supported by the Home Office. That young person will not be given any information about how to challenge or appeal that decision. They won't be referred by the Home Office to any resources, services or anything. They will very much just be placed there, probably informed that they need an immigration solicitor for their asylum claim, but often not even really given that advice. So which is again illustrates like how important a service like Always Heard is, and how the more that you guys are able to spread the word of your amazing service, the better it will be, because it's sort of being able to sort of cover such a wide area nationally, because the telephone-based support service you provide is quite remarkable, and not something else that anyone else can really provide at the moment. And there's also a scenario to say as well that in some cases there can be people in that scenario where they've been with the local authority, had an age assessment, been found to be adults, and then returned to hotels, or they may have somehow come to the attention of the local authority first, been assessed as adults, and passed through to the Home Office to be in a hotel. But the vast majority is this sort of based on physical appearance only, and a decision being taken about age. When we see that, you tend to find that they're not being found to be sort of 18 or 19, it's more sort of 23, 24, 25, and that's just because the Home Office are aware that they're significantly over 18. They don't want to sort of leave themselves open for a challenge. They want to make sure, so they tend to go like 23 plus, because they think then that's a more solid decision. So you'll often see that young people are given ages around 23 to 25 in that scenario. The reality is that decision is made after a very short conversation with the young person, usually in quite a stressful situation, because they've very newly arrived in the UK, quite often after a very long and tiring and often traumatic journey. And they will just be issued with paperwork that says that sometimes the young person doesn't even really understand that decision has been made, or why it's been made, or what the documents say. If the Home Office feel that they have concerns about age, but don't feel they're significantly over 18, it's unclear, then they will refer them into the local authority for a full age assessment. So that's another scenario that can happen. And at that point, they should be removed from the hotel and go to the local authority pending the assessment. So I guess moving on to sort of what happens with the local authority when they become aware of a potential child in their area who's in need of care and support. It's sort of based on a referral that they receive, usually through advocacy or through some organisation that's supporting the young person. And there isn't a legal duty to do an age assessment. It's all sort of encompassed within the legal duties to assess whether there's a child in need that then is eligible for support and services. So part of that is deciding whether, firstly, they're a child. So that's where the age assessment sort of comes into play. We'd expect local authorities to be accommodating pending the outcome of assessments, but that in reality may not actually mean it stretches more than to a night, because they can be speedy when they want to be, but can also mean that they can be quite a lengthy process, and a young person can be accommodated for quite a long time with the local authority whilst waiting for an age decision. Neither of those scenarios are particularly great, because the young person's in a state of limbo if they're waiting for a long time. And if it's a short, sharp decision, then obviously that starts sort of the time ticking in terms of looking to challenge that decision, and accessing legal support, and sort of all the other sort of obstacles that sort of negative decisions then that comes with it. So I just wanted to quickly, without sort of going into too much detail, just explain that how local authorities do age assessments has now got quite a clear structure in terms of procedures and guidelines, and they're often referred to sort of the Merton Principles, or a assessment being Merton compliant. And all that sort of means is that has the assessment followed the correct guidance and procedures for it to be lawful, and it's basically comes from a case law that involved Merton Council, which is why it's sort of got that name. There's quite a long list of things, but I just sort of thought the main ones might be helpful just to have a sort of understanding of sort of what age assessments, when they're taking place, sort of look like. So they're basically done through an interview process. There should be 2 suitably qualified and trained social workers, an interpreter present if the young person requires one, with making sure that's the correct dialect. And the decision shouldn't be based on appearance alone. That's sort of one of the key things that has come through, which is obviously why it's slightly at odds with the fact it can be on appearance alone when done by the Home Office and sort of saying that they're significantly over 18. And it should be a holistic process. So it needs to take into account all relevant factors, and the social workers should try and elicit as much information from the young person as possible and explore all supporting evidence before sort of reaching any decision. A key role, which again, I don't know that some of you may actually have experience in providing the role, is the appropriate adult. So that's an independent person who attends the age assessment meetings with the young person to support the young person. So they shouldn't be employees of the local authority, and they can be of the young person's choosing, though quite often, unfortunately, there isn't anybody who's able to fulfill that role for the young person that they know. So they are actually appointed by the local authority, usually contracted through a charity or other sort of arrangement. And then another thing is just to say that the young person, so that they are clear about why they've been assessed to be over 18, they should be informed of the reasons and given an opportunity to respond. And that's called a minded to process, which again, whilst very clearly required, that doesn't always happen. And then the young person should be provided with the written decision with the clear reasons. And another key one is the young person should be given the benefit of the doubt. So that's about the sort of the approach that should be taken. Shouldn't be doing the assessment to see whether the young person can prove that they're a child. That should be about thinking of giving them the benefit of the doubt, starting from a position of believing them, and only coming to another conclusion if it's clear and there's clear evidence and reasons to say that they're not. However, that is not something that we see a lot of, sadly. So since lockdown, it feels that the numbers have dramatically increased on the age assessment front. And I just wanted to flag, and I'm not going to go into much detail because it's not that sort of relevant, but that there has been a recent case at the High Court about processes that were taking place in Kent, where a Kent intake unit was set up, which was sort of for social workers to pretty much quickly churn out decisions on age, alongside Home Office officials. And basically they were very cursory, and it was going on for quite a long time. There were quite a lot of challenges in play, and the good news is the court found that any age assessment that started, so any kind of social worker involvement within the process where it's claiming to be an age assessment, has to comply with the Merton Principles. It has to be lawful. They can't kind of just do what is sort of looked at as a shortened version, just to try and get to a quick decision. So that is been found to be unlawful, and I just wanted to flag that just in case any young people, you have to see any paperwork where it says Kent intake unit. That should hopefully mean the young person has quite a good chance of challenging the decision. So it was just something I thought might be helpful to look out for if you were looking at any age papers. Obviously, if the age is accepted, the young person then is supported and gets services under Section 20 as a looked after child. And then we'll get support post 18, either as a former relevant child or a qualifying child, depending on whether they've got their 13 weeks before their 18th birthday. So the outcomes are obviously huge. And there's obviously then a knock-on benefit to their asylum claim, depending at what point that's in by the time that the age has been determined. And then, like I had mentioned before, there can be children that are accepted as older rather than their claimed age. So again, those ones should still be looked at as possible challenges, even though they've been found to be children, because it's, again, goes to their part of their identity, but also is really crucial in terms of what support and services they can access, particularly in relation to education, particularly in relation to mental health, and also can go to accommodation and sort of support. I mean, that really should be based on need, but tends to be based on age. And then obviously those that have accepted, found to be adults after a local authority assessment, any services and support will stop and they will be referred to the Home Office. That's usually done pretty quickly, and that will usually be an adult hotel. They will then receive minimum amount of money, and that's it. There's no other support that's given. So challenging the decisions. Sorry, I don't know how I'm doing for time. I'm probably being a bit slow. I'll try and make it quick, but basically the way to challenge the age decisions, the sort of legal mechanism, is by way of a judicial review application. And there's a 3-month deadline to issue a judicial review from the date of the decision. But I just wanted to say that if that 3-month deadline has passed, when the young person comes to any of you guys, still look to get legal advice for them, because there are often reasons that it can be used to explain the delay, but also it generate new decisions by asking for reassessments and reviews. And quite often there's procedural problems, flaws with it, where they haven't followed the Merton Principles, and they are the main grounds to challenge. But actually, to get a different outcome and not just a continual kind of cycle of reassessing, the young person needs to build a positive case on their age. So that's where evidence and support from professionals that they're working with, teachers, youth workers, any documents they have, any family and friends in the UK, any information on their social services file, any issues about their mental health, that will all go to trying to gather positive information in support of their age, in the hope that any new assessment will come through with a different outcome. Because the problem is, if it's just a procedural argument, then those procedural issues will be addressed, but the outcome may not change because the information will be the same. And I see that quite often with young people going through an age assessment process, having a reassessment, and maybe there hasn't been the work that's been needed to try and get that positive case for them, and then their expectations about what's going to happen are not in line with reality of, unfortunately, it's likely to lead to the same conclusion. And then just super briefly to say that when age can't be agreed and you've sort of been through reassessment processes, then currently what would happen is that you'd be asking the court, as long as you had a strong enough case, and they would list a fact-finding hearing. It's usually over a few days. It's quite a brutal, in my view, a brutal process, involves cross-examination of the young person, basically trying to pick apart their credibility, and isn't a particularly easy thing to watch. And because the judges don't even have to accept claimed age or assessed age and can actually just give their own age, it's quite a lottery. So trying to avoid that for a young person, I think, is the best outcome, because it's, there's no guarantee that it's going to get a positive outcome. And then, just to say that the whole process is going to be changing soon, because the plan is that they are going to be setting up a national age assessment board. The details are sort of still being kept, secret, basically, currently. There's lots of discussions, lots of forums, lots of kind of requests for input from the Home Office, but it's still very unclear kind of what that's going to look like. But when that does come into play, that currently looks like it will provide an entirely different way of appealing these age decisions, which I think, if there's enough legal representatives to then take on those cases, may not be a bad thing. If it's a specially tailored tribunal process just for age, then hopefully it should be a better process than the one we have. But it is the Home Office, so who knows? And then I just wanted to say that, just really reiterate how important sort of the frontline workers and the advocates are for this group, because we as solicitors have no way of reaching out to these young people. We are 100% reliant on others picking it up, identifying the issues and referring them in. So keep doing what you're doing, because it's like so needed, and the numbers are only going to rise.
Thank you, Keely, and thank you for rising from your sick bed to share that.
Okay, no worries.
Really, really helpful. We've not got time for questions, I'm afraid. But,
sorry.
No, that's okay. All right, we'll have a quick one. Rona, I see your hand up. I can't but help. Or was that a clap?
Sorry, that was a clap.
Okay,
that was
great,
a clap.
great, okay.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you.
The key takeaways, I think, is that all these things are challenged, but so you should definitely, if you're working with a young person whose age has been disputed, that should not be left as a settled fact. It may be scope for challenge, and that you need to support that young person, let that young person know about access to legal support and help them to get it. So many thanks, Keely, and I hope you recover well.